Hello, good morning. I'm Matt Addison. Andrew Beasley is alongside me today. I've not done one of these for a while, so good to be back on. We're going to talk a little bit about Mason Mount and Sofyan Amrabat over the next few minutes. All the latest transfer links, but we'll start with a quick look at the proper stuff coming back. Andrew, we've had 17 days it will be by the time Liverpool play again, having last played so long ago. You must be looking forward to watching Liverpool again, but it is a big week. What are you sort of thinking about heading into this sort of Manchester City, Chelsea and Arsenal? It's a big triple header to come back to, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't get a much more exciting week. I'm not sure they've ever played sort of three top teams in the space of 8 days, certainly in league games before, or not that I can remember anyway. You can see a scenario where it wouldn't be that unfeasible for them to take no points from these games. I think 9 is unlikely, but obviously they'll probably land somewhere in the middle, and how that goes could have a big say in the rest of the season. Obviously, the interesting thing with Liverpool, as we all know, is they've tended to do better in the tougher games this season. Their points per game average is better against the top 6 than it is against the teams below them in the league. Doesn't mean automatically that they're going to, win all these games in the next week. But it's certainly exciting to look forward to and sort of think about, well, how many points will they get? Can they possibly get a couple of wins? That would be ideal, but who knows really?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it, to see sort of the lineups that Liverpool take. I think a couple of the games you think of Manchester City, if Liverpool could draw with Manchester City, maybe that makes the Arsenal game a little bit easier, because then Arsenal are thinking they've only got to match what Manchester City have done against Liverpool. I think there's going to be a few little interesting parts of this. But if I offered you 5 points, would you take 5 points from the 3 games, do you think?
That's an interesting question. I think I probably would, because 2 of them are away from home. And obviously Liverpool's away record away from home has not been good this season. I obviously saying about them being better in the big games. I mean, they did win at Tottenham and stuff like that, and at Newcastle. But I think if they took 5 points, I think that would probably be okay. I mean, they don't have a good record at the Etihad. They won in Klopp's first visit, and they won in the Champions League. But that was a slightly different situation in that City had to go for that game. So sort of in a regular league game, they don't have a great record there. Chelsea, obviously slightly better there, but obviously last season they were 2-0 up and it ended up 2-2. I think they can be confident against Arsenal at home, as good as Arsenal have been this season, just because they have that sort of history of playing well against Arsenal at Anfield. So I think I probably would take 5 points, which is that the coward's way out? I don't know, but I think it's hard to make a strong case for them winning 2 of the games, which they'd need to get more than 5 points. So yeah, I think 5 would certainly be okay.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think 5 would be okay. I can see maybe a win against Arsenal is the most likely, but then you think that Chelsea have not been particularly brilliant this season. Possibly that's a bit of an opportunity as well. But the hardest one, I think, is the first one, the Manchester City one, not least because it's a 12:30, which I don't particularly enjoy watching Liverpool in 12:30s historically, and certainly not this season as well. So certainly will be interesting to see what happens in there. But let's move on then to a couple of those transfer links. We'll start with Sofyan Amrabat, Fiorentina midfielder. Obviously had a good World Cup, was linked with Liverpool off the back of that. Do you reckon there's anything in this? I'm not personally convinced that Liverpool would be particularly interested in this player, but he does keep being linked with the Reds.
Yeah, he's a funny one, because with all the links that keep coming through, as you say, I'd actually sort of forgotten about him. It was all very hot during the World Cup, both because of his performances, a lot of stories linking him to Liverpool, but also to lots of other clubs as well. I think Atletico Madrid were said to be his sort of favoured choice, or they were in the mix or something like that. And I think everyone sort of assumed, well, he'll obviously move in January after a good World Cup, and then it didn't happen. And as I say, I'd sort of forgotten about him a little bit, to be honest. I mean, I think he would still add something to sort of Liverpool's midfield and stuff like that. But yeah, it doesn't sort of feel like a deal that's particularly on the cards. Liverpool have shown in the past they sort of sign players without you sort of realising they were interested. So, you always have to bear that in mind. Not always a big sort of drawn out long build up with them. But yeah, it feels like one that, if it was going to happen, might have happened in January, and possibly his time has passed. But I mean, I'm sure he'll probably move this summer, because they'll get some offers, Fiorentina. But yeah, I'm not sure if he's destined for Liverpool. That seems a bit unlikely, I think, now.
yeah, there's certainly a number of players who are ahead of him in the pecking order, I think, in terms of what Liverpool would want to go for. Jude Bellingham, the obvious one. Mason Mount we'll come back to in just a second as well. Probably one or two others I'd have in front of Amrabat as well. But I think it is interesting that he is effectively just a holding midfielder. He doesn't really play in other positions. He's very much a defensive-minded player. Is that something that you'd be looking for in the summer, do you think? I mean, it's probably one that I would have done last summer, but maybe the emergence of Stefan Bajcetic has changed my opinion a little bit. But it will be interesting to see which profile of player Liverpool go for in the summer.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of question marks here, really. I mean, is Fabinho going to be able to get back to something approaching his best form? Which other midfielders are Liverpool bringing in? Are they going to stick with the 4-3-3? Is it going to be a change of formation? A lot of the players they're linked with have done well in a 4-2-3-1. There's a lot of question marks, obviously. But I agree with you. I think perhaps what Liverpool might want, as an example, is for Fabinho to sort of keep going at a decent enough level long enough until Bajcetic is ready to basically play every week. And maybe that will come quite soon. I mean, he was doing well before his injury, but obviously he's still very young. If they see him as the long-term player to play the defensive midfield role, then there's not a lot of point spending a lot of money on Amrabat or somebody similar if it's going to sort of block his progression. So they will obviously, at the background of the club, know a lot more about this. We can only sort of idly speculate, but yeah, I think I'm with you. It doesn't feel like they'd be signing a full-on sort of defensive midfielder this summer for that reason, because that could well be Bajcetic's role. Well, who knows? I mean, the next decade, once he's sort of properly in the team. So yeah, they don't really need a short-term option, particularly if they can Fabinho can perform well enough in the meantime.
Yeah, it does sort of make sense that would be the plan with the players who are being most heavily linked. Obviously, Bellingham, we know, is the one that they want the most. It looks like Mason Mount is an option as well. Mateus Nunes definitely is one that they've looked at in the past and could revisit. But Mason Mount, let's talk a little bit more about him. We've spoken at length about various other options. I've not really spoken too often about Mason Mount, but I do really, really like him. I think he's a really, really effective signing for Liverpool this summer. He's only got 12 months left on his Chelsea contract. He's the perfect age. He's homegrown. He's almost a bit like Adam Lallana, I think, but obviously a lot more reliable and able to be on the pitch a lot more often. It ticks pretty much every box for me. What do you reckon of Mason Mount?
Yeah, same. I think the Lallana comparison comes up quite a lot when people talk about him from a sort of Liverpool perspective, and it seems like a fair comparison to me. I think what you've got to remember, I mean, you look at him this season and he looks like he's had quite a disappointing year, and I guess he has. I think it's 3 goals and 2 assists in the league, or 2 goals and 3 assists, whichever way around it is. But he got double figures for both last season, and that's really rare. I mean, you only get about probably 10 players in the big 5 leagues hit double figures for both each season. It's a rare feat to do it. Even less do it if you exclude penalties, and he managed to do it. Now, that doesn't mean he's perfect for Liverpool, but I think it's important to look beyond the fact that he has had a fairly disappointing season and say, yeah, but he achieved this when he was sort of 23 and stuff like that. And there aren't going to be many midfielders around who are going to bring that to any team. So he's sort of got that in his favour. And I think as well, I was looking yesterday because I wrote a thing for the Echo. I don't think it's out yet, but he did a lot better under Thomas Tuchel than he did under Lampard and Graham Potter. Now, I think most people would view Tuchel as the better manager. And obviously there's a Klopp comparison there. You know, Chelsea chop and change their managers. He did pretty well for Thomas Tuchel, assisted the winning goal in the Champions League final, stuff like that. If he's going to come to Liverpool, he'll get 3 years of Klopp. We assume Klopp will see out his contract, get 3 years of Klopp, 3 years with the same manager. Broadly similar manager to one who's got the best out of him in the past. You can see a way in which he sort of ticks a lot of boxes for both for the player and for Liverpool, that it could work out pretty well. Whether Chelsea will sell him to Liverpool remains to be seen, of course. I'm not sure. Depends how much they ask. He has only got 1 year left on his deal, but obviously as a homegrown player, that always carries a bit of a premium and stuff like that. But I think it would be a good move for both him and Liverpool. But we'll obviously have to see if it actually happens.
Yeah, it would be an exciting one to me. I think if Jude Bellingham didn't exist, a lot of people would be a lot more excited about the prospect of Mason Mount coming to Liverpool. But if they could get both of them, that would certainly be the ideal situation. And another little hypothetical for you, I was having to think about this earlier in the week with Mount and Bellingham. If Liverpool only got Mount and Bellingham in the summer, would you be happy with that as a transfer window, or do you think they need a little bit more?
It's a difficult one. I think they probably do need more than two players, but if they only got those two players, I think you'd have to be fairly happy with it, really, because of what they should be able to bring to the team. They would reinvigorate the midfield. You know, a lot of the midfielders have been written off this season, and you know, a lot of them have been disappointing. But with some fresh legs of that quality added, you'd have to think it should bring up the level of the rest. So I don't think it would be a perfect summer, but I think you'd have to be happy if they got Bellingham and Mount, because again, you know, there's two players who should easily be there for like 5 years, ideally longer in Bellingham's case, but he's still got a hell of a lot of career ahead of him. I think I'd be happy if they signed those two players and nobody else, but it still wouldn't be a perfect summer, such as the sort of level of work that needs to be done. But I think they would certainly improve things a lot, and you know, should be on for a better season next year with those two on board.
Yeah, I think those two are the starting point for me. If you go with those two and then you see what happens at centre-back, maybe Joel Matip leaves if a big enough offer was to come in, maybe Kelleher wants to go. I think obviously then you've got to go out and get replacements for those two if they were to leave. But Mount and Bellingham, I think, would be a very good starting point. But we shall see what happens in the next few months, and obviously across the summer as well. We'll keep going with these morning streams. I mentioned it when I was last on a couple of weeks ago. We're hoping to do another one of these streams a little bit later on in the day as well. So do let us know if you'd be interested in that in the comments. But we shall leave it there for now. Loads of things on Liverpool.com. If you go and check out the website, lots of stuff around Mount. There'll probably be stuff about Amrabat there today as well. There'll certainly be a lot of stuff about Jude Bellingham as well. So do check all of that out. But for now, we shall leave it there. Thank you very much to Andrew for joining me, and for you at home for watching along too. We'll catch you very soon.